The estate of Brenda Cox came to us from the local authority who were looking for Brenda's family. When we found a beneficiary and we contacted him, he had some really interesting stories about his family, his father and the war as well. It doesn't always happen that we have a chance to sit down and listen to a beneficiary's family history, particularly when they have so many memories. There's always a story behind why the family became slightly disjointed and why they lost contact with the deceased.
The story I was told was that when he came home, he asked his mother for his money and his money had gone.
He's talking about another generation, his parents' generation. And the time they were living in, you know, the wartime was really, really difficult. So the estate of Brenda Cox came to us from the local authority. They were unusually already in contact with a member of the family, but they were quite elderly and in the USA, so they were unable to deal with the estate itself. The question the local authority wanted to know, was there any other family? And that's where we began our research.
The first thing we do when we get a case in like this is to look at all the old addresses that the deceased lived at. This sort of gives us information, if there is any, whether the deceased lived with any family members or with any friends that we could potentially contact. I don't think that we could find any in this case, so then we just look for the birth, marriage and death records. So we found a birth record for Brenda in the Cambridge registration district. From that we could see that Brenda's mother's maiden name was Searle. With her surname being Cox and with the mother's maiden name being Searle, it was quite easy for us to locate a marriage record in 1938 in Cambridge, which gave us the mother's name of Grace Searle. So from the research that we conducted, we were able to establish that Grace had 3 siblings. They were Ansel, Philip and Joan. Ansel married, in fact he married twice, but he only had the one child, George, who was our potential beneficiary on this estate on the other side. Philip, as far as we can see, never married, and Joan, the aunt of the deceased, she did marry, but she didn't have any children. So when contacting beneficiaries, you've got to really bear in mind that they may have known the deceased. And in any case that we're looking at, we have to have that in the back of our mind. So when I was contacting George, I was very conscious that he was local to the area. One of the things we were wondering was, you know, did he know the deceased? Had he been in contact with them? So George, we are obviously looking at the estate of Brenda Cox and the Searle family in particular, and I know you've got quite a few memories about the Searle family, which are particularly interesting, and it kind of gives us a picture of what happened. Because obviously Brenda, when she passed away, she died with no known family. But you've shown me this amazing picture, and I think, if I'm right in saying, this has got everybody, the whole family.
Grandmother.
So that's Winifred.
Yeah. Granddad Searle. Then the one at the back there is Grace, the oldest daughter. Then you've got Ansel, my father, the oldest son. And then you've got Philip, this side, was the youngest son. And Joan, sitting in the front, is the youngest daughter, the youngest child.
So your father obviously fell out with the family. And that was a very specific reason. Do you recall what it was?
The version I was told is that when he went into the army for 6.5 years to fight the war, there wasn't a lot to do out there and that, so obviously the pay he used to send back home. And he was hoping that his mother would save it and keep it for him, and he would have some money to buy a piece of land or buy a house when he got home and settled down, if he came home. And when he come back, he went to his mum for the money, and she said, I'm sorry, I haven't got it. I've given it to your sister to buy a house with. And so that was the split. No, he wasn't very happy at all, and I don't think he ever had anything more to do with the family.
No. I mean, I can imagine it. I think anybody could imagine it, fighting in the war for such a long time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure a lot of people sent their money home to be looked after, so they could use it when they get back.
Yeah.
And then to discover it's all gone.
Yeah.
You can see. Yeah. I can imagine the reaction. It's almost come full circle in that, you know, your father's money that was used by Grace to buy the property has eventually found its way back to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just hope I've got his money back for him with interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
When he died, he was still fighting the war.
Really?
Yeah, Mum used to say at nights he would be throwing himself around in the bed, and he was still fighting.
Yeah.
It affected him badly. He had he retired, or he finished work in his early 50s because of mental health issues.
Yeah.
And like I would think thousands of the men that was out there, it really affected him.
Yeah. Undiagnosed, and it was, you know, like for many people, never addressed.
Yeah.
You know, I think your father would have been one of many people. Was he in the army? I take it was.
Yeah, he was in the 8th Army. He was the Suffolks. He was based at one time at Bury St Edmunds.
Yep.
Because towards the end, I used to take him over there once a year. They used to have a sort of a get-together parade, and in the end, I used to take him, push him round in his wheelchair and see his old comrades and that.
What's really springs to mind is the fact that he's talking about another generation, his parents' generation, and the time they were living in. You know, the wartime was really difficult, and whilst everybody had the expectations of how things would pan out, that's not always the case. And in this particular instance, the deceased became the owner of a property that really should have gone to Ansell.
Information that we accumulate during the research process generally comes from certificates, from census records and probate records, and we're often quite unaware of the real family dynamics and interesting events that may have involved the people that we're researching. In this case, I knew that Brenda was an accountant from a death certificate and that she'd lived at the same address from her birth until she passed away in 2020. It was not until Gareth contacted Mr. Searle that I really got a more sort of interesting and detailed picture of what happened within the lifetime of the deceased, and indeed the other family members we have on our family tree.
Right.
So did you ever meet Brenda at all? Do you recall ever meeting her?
I did just a few years ago. When Joan's husband was alive, and they didn't have anything to do with Grace either.
Right, yeah.
But once Uncle Arthur died, Grace and Joan did get in touch and they did see each other. Right. And one of the times that they was there one day, I went round and I'd have cut the grass or do some work. I used to do all Aunt Joan's jobs for her and things, and they was there. So I did meet Brenda a couple of times in later life. But then unfortunately Aunt Joan wasn't very well for a time, and Brenda didn't phone her to ask how she was or anything or what was wrong. They never had no more to do with each other. No. So the last probably 3 years, they never had nothing to do with each other as well.
So when we first contacted you, you know, obviously it was out of the blue. How did you feel?
I was sceptical. I thought it was a scam. I thought, things like this don't happen to me. But the chap on the door, he showed his badge and he sort of convinced me that it was in my interest to do something about it. So he convinced me that then it wasn't a scam and everything was okay, and I signed up and went ahead with it.
Brilliant. And one of the reasons we ask the questions is, particularly when we're first contacting you, is that we're trying to make sure you are related.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the research at the early stages, you know, we think you're related,
Yeah.
but, you know, with your help, we can confirm that.
Yes.
So hence the contact in person.
Yeah, yeah. But the information I've got back from your people has been good and it's been interesting.
Good. That's the important
to know
thing.
about.
Yeah. I mean, it's you know, we discover an awful lot about the family history. And, you know, one of the positive things about it is that we can pass that on to yourself.
Yeah.
It's quite unusual to get such a detailed story of the history of the family. It's really interesting to get that feedback and, you know, that knowledge, because when we're creating a family tree, we've only got the dates and you know, names and that's it. There's no real detail into the family. So I think my favourite part speaking with George was just getting that history about the family. We are, at the end of the day, genealogists. We're interested in history, so it's really good to get it from the horse's mouth. Next on Lineage.
The case of Peter Bailey came to us in 2022. When we looked into Mr. Bailey's family history, we noticed his daughter Lynn and wife Mary passed many years before him. When you come across things like this, you have to wonder what became of the person who lost his wife and child. What was his life like? Did he have any support? Did he have any family around him?